All right, here's part 2 of your lesson. I thought the other one was part 2 of the lesson, but the pages were kind of stuck together. And I ended up doing the second page of the homework. So here's the second page of the lesson. Let's do that. 4 times 9 is 36 and negative 12. What's going to fit? So the two numbers are negative 6 and negative 6. They match. It's going to be a perfect square. And then I divide by 4. It has to be in lowest terms, so that's 3 over 2 and 3 over 2 by dividing by 2. And I'm going to slide that 2 in front. They repeat, so I can just write it as 2r minus 3 squared. Let's try number 16. So again, 4 times 1 and negative 4. So the two numbers are negative 2 and negative 2. They multiply to 4 and add to negative 4. So I have m minus 2 and m minus 2. Divide by 4 and reduce it down. So that's 1/2 and 1/2. It's going to be a perfect square again. So then slide the 2 in front, and you can write it twice or you can just square it. And there's your answer. Number 17 is called the difference of squares. So you square root and square root. So it's a binomial and subtracting. Square root of 9 and x squared, the square root of 4. What number times itself is 9? What number times itself is 4? So one factor is adding and one is subtracting. So 3x plus 2 and 3x take away 2. Here again, I need to multiply. So the first number times the last number is 100 and negative 20. It's going to be a perfect square again because it's negative 10 and negative 10 that add up to negative 20 and multiply to 100. So I'm going to write down negative 10 and negative 10 and then divide by 4. That has to be reduced down. So that's going to be 5 over 2. When you divide by 2 to reduce it down, slide the 2 in front, and then you can square it because it gets repeated. All right, this one's going to be called grouping. So when you have 4 terms, you're going to look at the first 2, and you're going to factor out what they have in common. So you're going to factor out a 3 and an n squared, and then divide to see what's left. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to factor out what they have in common. So what number goes into negative 2 and negative 6? So I'm going to factor out a negative 2 and then divide. And then these parentheses have to match. So that matching factor, and then 3n squared minus 2. All right, let's try that again. So we have this, and we're going to factor out a 2 and a p squared, divide. We're going to factor out a 1 and divide. And then I'm left with that factor that matches, and then 2p squared plus 1. All right, let's try it again. So we're going to factor out a 4, doesn't go in it. So look at the first 2 and a squared, and then divide of what's left. So 4 divided by 2, and there's 1a. 6 divided by 2. Do the same thing here. Factor out a 3. Divide. And I get 2a minus 3 and 2a squared plus 3. All right, look at the next one. Factor. So we're going to factor out a v squared. Divide. Factor out a negative 1. Divide. So they share v plus 1. And then what's in front is v squared take away 1. That's a difference of squares. So it's not prime yet. So the square root of v squared is v. And the square root of 1 is 1. So we have v plus 1. And then we have v plus 1, v minus 1. The difference of squares. You could also write that as v plus 1 squared. All right, 2 left for the lesson. Let's do this together again. Group. They have an x squared in common. That's 3x plus 1 when you divide. Look at the last 2. They only have a negative 1 in common. That's 3x plus 1. Press pause again if it's going too fast. They share the factor x, 3x plus 1. And then what's left in front is x squared take away 1. We just did that, right? It's a difference of squares. So when you square root each one, that's x plus 1 and x minus 1. All right, last one to practice. Press pause and see if you can do it. the first two terms, 2a squared, divide. The next one, that's a plus sign. So we're going to factor out 1. And when you do that, it just stays 2a minus 3. So one factor is what they share, and then what's in front of each one is the second factor. And that's it. So now you're going to do your homework and you're going to practice these techniques, and I'll have a video for that too. Mr. GMath, over.